All right, Mike, you want to get started?
Sure. All right, we all set? All right. Good morning, everyone. We want to speak to you today about reimagining parking in Fairfax County. My name is Michael Davis, and I'm the project manager for this parking effort. My agency, Land Development Services, is teaming with the Department of Planning and Development on this project. Austin Gastrell from Planning and Development will be co-presenting with me this morning. Just want to let everyone know that if you have any questions, you can raise your hand on the toolbar, and we will do a question and answer session after this presentation. Okay, Austin, next slide, please. Parking has a profound influence in Fairfax County. With some exceptions, all land uses are required to provide parking. Driving remains a common activity, and developers and property users feel obligated to provide it, even in places where it's not required. However, we must weigh the value of parking against other desirable community elements, such as affordability, equity, the environment, site design, and economic viability. The need to provide more parking than necessary and meet confusing and restrictive regulations hinders the accomplishment of these goals. The current regulations encourage placing a higher importance on driving and parking than the possibility of using excess parking to increase housing options. Regulations create challenges for startup businesses looking for affordable space when needing to meet paper parking requirements. The lack of flexibility creates lost opportunities to adjust development to preserve or enhance community space. Our presentation today creates an outline for an enhanced approach to parking regulation in the county, one that looks at the context of development as well as acknowledging that flexibility and predictability are important considerations for continuing our efforts for better, more compact land design, affordability, and economic growth. A primary goal of this project is right-sizing parking requirements. This concept involves sizing parking to the average demand for it. This approach applies to all areas of the county, from rural, suburban to high-intensity urban development. Because of these differences in character, different minimum parking requirements should apply. In lower density areas, we propose conventional approaches to parking, but want to avoid burdensome requirements. In medium density areas, we're accommodating innovation, but allowing conventional approaches. In higher density areas, we're pushing for innovation and discouraging conventional approaches. Overall, the next wave of development investment should involve less parking. If we meet the goal of right-sizing parking requirements, then other important goals can be realized. Opportunities for better land stewardship occur, such as designing sites to exchange parking for community and green spaces. Less parking with better land design, access to multiple transportation modes, and a mix of uses dampens the need and desire for personal vehicle travel. From an administrative point of view, simplification and flexibility in our parking requirements is expected to create opportunities beneficial to the community. While we strive to right-size parking and requirements, we also know there are places and uses that present parking challenges. This project continues to evaluate options to address those issues. The Parking Reimagined project is intended to examine and adjust parking requirements and processes to provide community benefits. In our effort to create places where people want to be, autos and parking must have less influence in design. The Cap One site in Tysons, the Mosaic District in Merrifield, and Reston Town Center are great examples where a walkable, compact, mixed-use urban design has taken precedence over street-oriented surface parking lots that create a vehicle gulf between the roadway and the place you want to be. These Main Street and urban, rail, and transit-accessible places are as much a part of the county's fabric as low-density, tree-covered residential suburban development. Both places, and the arc of development in between, offer desirable characteristics for living, work, and entertainment. The county needs a balance to thrive, and this includes something as mundane as parking requirements. Our population is diverse. Some want to live in areas where personal travel in cars is unimportant relative to being surrounded by urbanity. Others want to live in a community where green spaciousness is worth a trade-off of driving to access even basic goods and services. This approach to parking seeks to acknowledge and respect these diverse perspectives. Further, we want to diminish obstacles to business opportunities. Meeting arcane parking requirements and rates designed for more car-centric activities of 30 to 40 years ago constrains new business ventures, reinforces poor land and environmental management activities, and creates opportunity costs for uses that will provide community benefit, such as more affordable housing. All of this helps the county to succeed. With continued evaluation of a parking framework with our consultant, Nelson Nygaard, staff has created a proposed approach, which is depicted here. With the intent of right-sizing parking, this is particularly important where the densities and intensities of development allow for greater innovation and approaches. Thus, this map shows a concentration of areas subject to lower parking requirements. At least 90% of the county's land area will remain subject to baseline requirements with some proposed modifications. Lower minimum parking requirements are focused on areas defined in the comprehensive plan as growth areas. In this framework, the following tiers are proposed. In suburban centers, we want to recognize that while development in these areas is of relatively lower density, the concentration of development within these areas provides opportunities for modest connectivity and shared activities that reduce parking demand. A 10% baseline reduction is proposed. Revitalization areas, such as community business centers, community revitalization areas, and community revitalization districts, are proposed for a baseline 20% reduction, which is consistent with today's standards. Transit station areas and the Tysons Urban Center are areas adjacent to TOD areas and are proposed to have a 30% baseline reduction. These areas are generally planned for higher density mixed-use development with good access to Metro Rail, as well as higher quality transit availability and a more walkable environment. Transit-oriented development areas are proposed to have a baseline 40% reduction in the minimum parking requirements. These are areas within 1/2 mile of a metro station. Since many of these areas are planned for development that complements Metro Rail with higher density and intensity in compact urban designs, parking should be minimized to support the rail and transit investments and create a pedestrian-scaled community. For TOD, we are also proposing that property owners could adopt the current PTC low and no minimum requirements and parking maximums through the rezoning entitlement process or a staff-administered process. Planned Transit Tysons, also referenced as PTC zoning, are sites within the Tysons Urban Center that have been rezoned to the PTC district or have opted into the PTC through a staff-administered process. The Tysons Urban Center is the county's downtown with the highest allowable densities. With acceptance of the PTC designation, property owners have low or no minimum parking requirements and maximum parking requirements. The project proposes to retain these criteria for the Tysons Urban Center. The parking rates and area reductions under consideration with this project generally affect minimum requirements. Caps on parking, known as maximums, are only proposed with development that chooses to opt in to no minimum requirement. This option would only be available in the Tysons PTC and in transit-oriented development districts. We also want to note that as part of this evaluation of parking, we're also looking at accessible parking and making adjustments that would retain the amount of accessible parking based on the base parking rates in the county, rather than adjusting them downward with reductions that are proposed in this proposal here. With that, I will now turn this presentation over to Austin, who will continue discussing rates and other information.
Thank you, Mike. The next few slides show examples of base or minimum parking rates being examined by this project. The existing single-family attached dwelling or townhouse rate is 2.7 spaces per unit, with one space having convenient access to the street. In response to concerns regarding lack of available visitor or shared parking in townhouse communities, we are proposing to alter or redistribute the existing single-family attached rate by requiring that 0.7 spaces of the total 2.7 spaces required per unit are provided for visitor or shared uses. Reductions of the single-family detached base rate are currently only being proposed in the TSAs or transit station areas, TODs, and in the PTC district. So that is a big note about this, is that certain rates may not be subject to the reductions we talked about previously in certain areas. The proposed multifamily dwelling rate under consideration is 1.3 to 1.6 spaces per dwelling unit. This is an example of parking rate right sizing. The Institution of Transportation Engineers maintains national parking demand data through their document Parking Generation. ITE's data shows that national average parking demand for suburban non-transit served multifamily dwellings is 1.3 spaces per unit. Staff is also considering the possibility of a proposed multifamily dwelling rate based on a bedroom number, and where applicable, reductions to the multifamily dwelling base rate could be applied. The proposed restaurant rate under consideration is between 8 and 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area, and between 8 and 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet of outdoor seating area, in excess of 1,000 square feet. This is an example of rate right sizing and simplification. The size of a building or a tenant space is a known factor throughout all phases of a project's lifespan. By transitioning to a single rate solely based on square footage, we can provide greater flexibility and predictability to property owners and tenants. The proposed retail sales rate under consideration is between 3 and 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. This is an example of right sizing. Our current retail sales rate has not been revised since 1978. Since then, significant changes in shopping behavior have occurred, such as online sales, which have lowered parking demand. Local and national data shows that an average non-December parking demand for all retail uses is below the current county requirement. Please note that this retail sales rate applies to a single standalone building or use. A building that has 2 or more retail type uses is considered a shopping center. The example on this slide shows how the proposed retail sales rate would transition or decrease through the tiered framework. The minimum parking requirement or base rate would be declined by 10% in the suburban center, 20% in the revitalization area, 30% in the transit station area, and 40% in the TOD or transit-oriented development. Please note that this project does not seek to change the maximum parking requirements that currently exist. And like Mike mentioned earlier, maximums again are only going to be in place in the PTC district or when a TOD, someone in a TOD opts into that PTC or no minimum requirement. What we're talking about is minimum requirements, not maximum requirements. The existing office parking rate was last updated in 1988 when the 3 current rates were adopted. We are proposing to simplify this into 2 rates based on building size. The proposed office rate range under consideration for an office under 50,000 square feet is 3 to 3.6 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And the range under consideration for an office over 50,000 square feet is 2 to 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Similar to retail uses, office parking demand has drastically changed in the last 35 years. Remote working and flexible in-office schedules were becoming more commonplace before the pandemic, lowering average parking needs for offices. Further within the county, rail and bus transit services have expanded, providing travel alternatives. National survey data demonstrates that average parking demand for all office types is less than the current county requirement. This example shows how a parking requirement for an office over 50,000 square feet would translate through the tiered framework. The minimum parking rate requirement would decline by 10% in each tier from the proposed base rate to a transit-oriented development. This is also an example of right sizing of the minimum parking requirement. The proposed warehouse rate is shown as an example of rate simplification. Many industrial uses have a parking rate based on number of employees and company vehicles, but a total minimum of 1 space per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. We're proposing to simplify this rate by basing it solely on the square footage of the building. The size of a building, again, can be determined at any phase of project lifespan, and parking supply can be sized accordingly. Number of employees and company vehicles is not constant, which can require excess parking to be provided. A requirement to provide additional parking can create hardships and prevent establishment of new businesses. Since the kickoff of this project in October of 2021, we have conducted nearly 50 project meetings, which include supervisor-sponsored town halls, individual project meetings with all board members, as well as meetings with board advisory committees, community service groups, community associations, industry groups, and internal county agencies to discuss and seek feedback on this project. Since January, we've met monthly with our community project work group to discuss elements of our proposals and gain their feedback. These discussions have been important in modifying our proposal and framing our public discussions of it. Our initial public outreach efforts focused on values and rationales associated with the project. Our current phase of engagement is intended to give the community the ability to react and comment on tangible proposals. The updated project timeline before you shows our goal of bringing a complete proposal back to the Planning Commission and Board later this year or in early 2023. Lastly, we have a project webpage that is regularly updated with information and opportunities for the public to participate in the Parking Reimagined project. It is our intent to release draft parking rates organized by use category or incrementally throughout the summer. These releases will align with our future scheduled Parking Reimagined open houses, and drafts will be available on the webpage under the Documents tab. Draft copies of the proposed minimum parking rates for agricultural and residential uses will be posted on the webpage in the coming days. Thank you for your time and attendance today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Hi, this is Kevin Filane. Can you go to the map that showed the different categories? And thank you for the presentation. This is very, very helpful. Yeah, I was kind of looking at the map. I saw that you have like the suburban centers, and I'm looking at particular, what I see as being the area where the government center is, biggest Fair Oaks and Fairfax corner. And then there's the green area in there. And so, so I guess according to this, I don't know if is that encompassing like the Fair Oaks Mall and Fairfax corner? And
yeah, that is the suburban core area of the suburban center, and that was denoted as an area that is of higher density. And Mike, do you want to kind of explain some of the transit proposals for that area?
That's like
we were trying to target that specific area because the government center is here, Fair Oaks Mall, and potential redevelopment of the mall site. So there's a higher, because there is the future Orange Line extension station location proposed for the I-66 corridor, but then currently there's a commuter parking garage being constructed that will serve buses that are moving through the I-66 corridor as part of the expansion of that roadway for express lane service. The state is also enhancing bus service, and this commuter park and ride garage is part of that project. And so we're looking at that as being a more concentrated development area oriented to rail. And so we're calling that out more specifically within the greater Fairfax Center area as a place where additional parking reductions consistent with the other community business centers would be appropriate.
Okay, and then where it says the 20% reduction for an area like that, that's 20% reduced from the new proposed rates.
Correct.
So there's going to be the baseline rates, and then there'll be a 20% from that, and that's 20% off residential and non-residential rate ratio.
So what we're currently looking at is that so single family detached, single family detached would generally stay static throughout the tiers, unless for some reason there was a detached and a TOD, which most likely there wouldn't be. And so single family attached, what we're talking about currently in the proposal currently is to keep a static single family attached rate throughout all tiers except for the TSA and TOD. And then in PTC districts, and then multifamily dwellings, there is the conversation about having having multifamily dwellings be incorporated with the reduction shown in suburban centers, CRDs, transit areas, Tyson's Urban Center, TSAs, and PTC.
Okay, so that would just from what I was trying to take some notes going along the way. So where like a baseline may fall somewhere between 1.3 and 1.6, then it would potentially be a 20% reduction off of the 1.3 or 1.6, wherever that ends up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was very helpful. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I'm kind of following all the parts. And can you explain again the part where you're not in a PTC, but as part of a rezoning application, you could essentially, I guess you would like proffer to a max parking rate, and then you would have no minimums. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, it would work similarly to the PTC zoning approach that we have today. it would just be potentially extended to the TOD districts that are in the county. So it would kind of work. The vision is that it would work in the same way. And even from the standpoint of opting in, we have a staff administered process in land development services that allows consideration to opt in to those PTC rates. And so the proposal would extend that to the TOD.
Okay, understood. Okay, great. And then I guess this map that we're looking at, I guess that's probably still working. I'm always kind of curious if there's a zoomed in version that I could kind of stare into, but.
So this map currently is on the webpage as well. It was this is the map that was presented to the Board of Supervisors Land Use Policy Committee on the 14th of June, and it's on their webpage as well. We do not currently have a zoomed in map, but we'll have that here shortly for different areas.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
No problem. Anybody else have any questions or comments, reactions to what we're thinking about with regard to reimagining parking here in the county?
Sorry, Kevin Flynn again. I have been just letting you, I've been getting a lot of questions about like when the rates will be coming out. I did hear that, I guess through the summer and getting into the fall, I mean, there's going to be, I guess more detail is going to be issued out. And so I guess that's going to be starting with July, August, September timeframe.
Yeah, so the agricultural and residential rates, we're going to be doing it by use category just to kind of incrementally release these rates because releasing it all as one table is kind of a big document to digest, as we found out throughout the process. So the residential and agricultural rates should be posted on our webpage under the Documents tab within the coming days. And then as we have future meetings, there's going to be a meeting, I believe, next Wednesday. It was going to be a 7 o'clock meeting, open house, very similar to this. We should have other rates such as possibly industrial rates to put out. And then as we go along, other sections of those rates will be released. So I would suggest just staying, keeping our webpage as a favorite, something like that, and just checking in, as well as we'll be using different county listservs and social media to then kind of put some news blasts out about these types of events and when different rates may be available.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Perito, you have your hand up with a question or comment.
Yeah, thank you very much. My question concerns the CBC, the downtown area of McLean, which is, I believe, a revitalization area as well. How does this apply to that specific area?
Well, in today's circumstance, the McLean CBC has an ability to opt into a 20% reduction through a Board of Supervisors administered process. So the proposal that we have brought forward remains consistent with that, except it would be an automatic reduction rather than a board approved reduction for a specific site or a specific action taken by the board. So the substance remains the same. It's just a matter of how it's implemented could potentially change as we're proposing. It would be more of a built-in 20% reduction opportunity.
Okay, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any comments, questions?
Sorry, I got it's Kevin again. One more.
Sure.
So I'm kind of looking at these rates, the proposal here, and just from industry, I'm always getting more questions about potential parking reductions that are being pursued, and it's kind of being in July, I kind of feel that any parking reduction that would be initiated, kind of starting now or even August would essentially carry you through a process that you would go to. You'd probably start arriving to the board in January, which is now going to be the time approximately when you would have new rates show up anyway. And part of the question is I'm getting should I pursue the parking reduction or parking reimagined may kind of obviate the need to even request a parking reduction. But I guess we don't really know what those rates are going to be until they're approved by the board. Right now I'm trying to tell folks, well, if you have a parking reduction, let's proceed forward with what's out there. And I guess during the process, I know we have pre-submission meetings. I guess it can be discussed about, maybe if their parking reduction, how they should proceed. Because I mean, there's definitely going to be a process to it, and not to waste anyone's time. I mean, if they're going to end up getting to a place with parking reimagined that may forgo the parking reduction, I guess. I don't know if my question is like, I don't know what your thoughts are with maybe someone who's maybe seeking a parking reduction here shortly, or.
Well, I think to be cautious, people should assume that the current procedures and rates and mechanisms for parking reductions will be the same, because clearly we don't know what the outcome of this approach will be. There are other circumstances that are involved with this proposal, in the sense that we also have administrative elements of the ordinance for parking that we're also looking at. And so there could be changes associated with those, in the sense of broadening capabilities for parking reductions, and making some changes that would make the administration of parking better. For example, we've talked in a number of public forums about looking at some broad use categories and seeing if we can treat those in a way to allow other uses to be established in those broad categories. For example, an office building is, primarily limited to office as far as the parking and the use of an office. What we're trying to look at is seeing if they could be treated more like a shopping center, where you would allow certain uses to be established in an office and the parking would be adequate, or seem to be adequate, for those other uses within an office building. So if you wanted to establish a retail use, or a school of special education or something like that, that process of being able to say the parking is fine would be made easier with this approach. So there are a number of elements that are kind of gears turning from an administrative point of view, as well as the approach that we've talked about today with the rates and the tiered approach for percentage reductions.
Okay. All right, thank you. And this presentation, is this going to be posted on the website this week, or?
Yeah, and this is actually being recorded as well, and so a video of our presentation, our conversation today, will be posted, and then a copy of the presentation will be posted as well. Jerry had put in the comment section a link to the board's webpage with links to the white paper and a altered version of this presentation, or a previous version of this presentation that was given to the board. We've just included some more of our rates in there for seeing that we have more time to have a conversation today than we did at the board.
Yep, I found that. Thank you, Jerry.
Mm-hmm. And what I'd say is that when we do release rates on our webpage, if you have any comments regarding those rates, we would love to hear them. Any suggestions, comments, edits that you suggest. We do have a email address that's noted on our webpage that you can get a hold of us. And if you would like to submit comments, I would suggest emailing them to that email address, which is on the webpage. Okay, does anyone else have any other comments? All right.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Those who have participated today. And as noted, we'll be having other open houses. So, for those who are here today, if you continue to be interested as we roll this information out, feel free to come to the additional open houses. It's not a one-time visit. And as Austin said, feel free to provide comments through our website, our listserv as well.
Okay. Well, everyone have a wonderful day, and we look forward to getting any comments you may have on our proposals.
Thank you very much.